Welcome to the Lalulah podcast, real life conversations about modern sexuality and how to live a happy, healthy, turned on life. I'm your host, Laura Allen, a holistic health coach and founder of Lalulah, an online platform offering natural erotica toys as well as the educational tools you need to expand your pleasure in and outside the bedroom. Welcome back to another episode of the Lalulah podcast. Today I have back on the show Cam Fraser, and I'm really excited about this episode because today we are rebranding monogamy. We talk about tips and tools and mindsets on how to keep our relationships happy, healthy, and thriving. We talk about freedom, we talk about complacency, we talk about sexuality, and so much more. So if you're interested in learning how to maintain a really beautiful relationship with not only yourself, but with your chosen partner, then this episode is for you. Enjoy. Hey Cam, welcome back again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, such a pleasure. Our last episode that we did was a total hit, and I just got so much amazing feedback from it. So I'm really, really excited to have you back on the show. And I remember us speaking in our last episode of this, really deep desire to look at monogamy and look at where it's kind of going wrong and how we can make monogamy work in the 21st century, because I feel like, there's lots of stuff, there's lots of noise out there, and, we've changed as human beings, society has changed, everything has changed, and, we need a new set of tools to kind of make this union work. So I'm really excited to hear what you've got to say on the matter.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat about this. Obviously, there's a lot of other kind of relationship styles out there, but what we talk about, I guess, today will be applicable to some of those relationships. But I'm in a monogamous relationship, and I feel kind of well versed enough to talk about monogamy rather than kind of alternative styles of relationships. So I'm keen to have a chat about this.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's just dive into it. So I guess the first thing that I wanted to talk about was what's going wrong? Like, what has happened over the last, 50, 60, maybe even 100 years that sort of like turned – well, no, I don't even know if that's the right question, actually. It's like, what is going wrong? What are some of the challenges that we are faced with in this day and age when it comes to commitment and monogamy?
I think, you've got to presuppose that there is like something going wrong with monogamy. And I guess this is like, testament to or evidenced by like the rising divorce rates, and like people are getting kind of like, if you're using marriage, I suppose, as like a standard for monogamous relationships, like people are getting married later. They're also, if they are getting divorced, they're not staying together as long. And then obviously the rising divorce rate across all like Western countries is nearly 50%. So I'm Australian. In Australia, we're at about 49% for marriages ending in divorce. So if you're using that as like a standard of monogamy, like there's definitely something going on, right? And we're not like there's a lot of different factors to that. So like with regards to like social, cultural factors, like, marriage and monogamy maybe isn't something that people, feel forced to do anymore. So, there's obviously, like we said, there's so many other alternative styles of relating out there. And so people have maybe, I guess, feeling like they're not pressured into the marriage anymore. They're not pressured into monogamous relationships anymore, which I think maybe they were in the past. So that's definitely a factor. And I wouldn't say that's it. I wouldn't say that's, that's not necessarily wrong as such. And that's not I guess it's not being detrimental to monogamy. They're just, people are kind of realizing there's other ways of relating. But if we're looking at like monogamous relationships and kind of what might be happening in them, something I see happening a lot, and I guess this is like an umbrella for all the issues that are kind of happening in monogamous relationships, is communication, right? There's just like a communication breakdown on like a whole bunch of different levels. And it's like, whenever we use the word communication, most people don't they think of like verbal communication, right? Like I'm not able to talk about my feelings or whatever it is with my partner because I feel blocked there, or there's resistance, or I just don't have the tools for it. But communication really goes into like, with regards to your like sexual body and your sexual urges and desires, not being able to communicate those things, goes into, yes, you're emotional, but also like, I guess like your mental body as well. So like, are you able to have a stimulating conversation with your partner? Are you able to communicate at that level as well as your emotional level, as well as your even spiritual level as well? Maybe there's like a disalignment or a disconnection between people's spirituality and not being able to communicate about that. So we often find like, marriage is really linked to religion and spirituality in a lot of places. I spent a lot of time in America, and that definitely was the case where I was there. And so maybe there's this misalignment with people's spirituality and being able to communicate openly about that. But really, there's what I see happening is this breakdown in communication at a bunch of different levels. So I'd say that is, with regards to my opinion, that is the kind of tantamount problem that I see happening in monogamous relationships.
Communication's such a needed tool for all relationships. It doesn't matter what dynamic you're in, right? I mean, especially even more so for these alternative relationship styles. But yeah, communication is such a big one. And I feel like there are other factors as well, like we live longer and society. I feel like relationships are so much more disposable. Maybe that's because I'm still in my 20s and I've traveled a lot and I've used all these dating apps and so on. But, this kind of like the romance and the fairy tale of happily ever after is kind of there. And I wonder, like, where did we lose hope in that style of relationship? And I hear it so much in like the dialogue amongst friends and sort of in the circles that I hang out with. It's just like, nothing lasts forever, and which may or may not be true, but it's like this very kind of doomsday narrative when it comes to love and devotion and commitment and that's just like the sacredness and union and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm like, where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, there's like a documentary on Netflix called, I think it's called The New Sexual Revolution, and it's about like young people, college age students in America going to spring break and really, really doing their best to divorce the act of sex from any type of intimacy, commitment, or long-term relationship. So, and they speak about it, and they speak about, sex just being a game and how there's no such thing as love and there's no point in pursuing a long-term relationship. And this is kind of the attitude that they go into their adult life with. They graduate college having this kind of mentality about love and long-term relationships and monogamy, I suppose, in general. And and it's just kind of cultivated throughout a young person's life that there's, well, for the most part anyway, at least in that scenario, that there's no love to be found. There's no point in pursuing it, right? There's like you said, there's no hope. And it's all, I guess, not all down to it, but a big part of that is, this like quick dating economy that we've got, right? Like your swipe right kind of scenario, and being able to kind of like find someone at the flick of a switch, or being able to always pursue the next person, or it's a very like grass is greener on the other side kind of mentality, right? So it's always like, well, what if there's someone else out there, and it's very easy for then that to become an actionable kind of thought. It's like, I'm sure many people have had, this thought in their relationship of, oh, what if I ended up with someone else? What if this happened? But now we've got the technology to be like, there is a what if at my fingertips. I could just be like, oh, yep, cool, there's a next person, and I'll just swipe and try and find them. So it's just become very accessible, I suppose. And this is, it's definitely a contributing factor to like the diminishment of like the longevity of relationships. It's just like, well, I can just drop you at the swipe of a finger because I've got the next person around the corner who, in a city with a couple million people, that could be a number of extra partners or whatever it is. So I definitely think technology and that kind of mentality is starting to erode maybe the longevity of monogamous relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so funny. When I was admittedly really active on these dating apps, like, sure, I was having a lot of fun, but I was very deeply unfulfilled. And something that I've noticed over time is that, yes, we have all of this accessibility, and yes, we have all of these options, yet we still deeply crave somewhere that depth of connection and love and like true intimacy. And I mean, it's just total human nature to want that. And I think there's a lot of confusion as to what that means and how to get it and what we actually need to do in order to achieve it and maintain it and keep it healthy. And I mean, personally, I'm a huge believer in the grass is greenest where you water it. And this whole thing of complacency, not only in relationships but in life, is something that just needs to be kind of looked at. So let's talk about conscious monogamy, sacred monogamy, deep diving with someone, with your chosen partner, and what that means and how to make it fucking awesome. Like, actually just like so awesome, like amazing. Because this is the thing, it's like those kinds of relationships, if that's what you want, if that's what your heart truly wants, if you're listening to this and you're going like, yes, like I am, like my deepest heart knows that it's, monogamous, and that can change throughout your life. There are phases and everything that we go through. But if you're listening to this and you're going like, yes, I want to do this like sacred union thing, it's so possible. And it's the mindset about, just like putting in the effort and making it awesome, because it really, really, really can be. So let's talk about how.
Beautiful. There's like this, I guess it's like an analogy or a metaphor that a teacher of mine used to say to me about monogamous relationships. And for a long time, I guess culturally or societally, we've had this idea that two people complete one another, right? And we have like this kind of yin yang scenario of these two people, as maybe like jigsaw pieces, like fitting together to create one whole. And he was like, this is actually what's damaging our idea of what a monogamous relationship is, because the other person in your relationship isn't necessarily there to complete you, because that fosters almost like a dependence on that person. Because if they're not there, and if they're not with you, and if they're not part of that relationship, then you aren't completed, right? So you're dependent upon that person to feel completed. So it kind of fosters this unhealthy attachment. So what he was saying, and kind of what I agree with as well, is that we need to start recognizing that we're two independent people. And I'm making a lot of hand gestures here, but we're like two circles, right? Each person is their own individual circle. And instead of coming together to overlap as like a yin yang symbol would, we need to come together and meet to make envision like an infinity symbol. So these two people together are choosing to be with one another. They're not necessarily completed by the other person, because they are their full individual whole completed person by themselves. And these two whole completed individual people choose to spend time with each other, choose to love one another, choose to love and create a relationship, and every day are choosing to do that, and are coming back to that to that choice, back to that decision to love and to cherish and to be with one another and spend time with one another, rather than having to be dependent on that other person. So I think this is like a really important like reframe of what a relationship is that like, instead of it being these two people that have to, depend on one another for that relationship and for that, this is, and it's in our language, right? This person, you complete me, or you're my better half, right? It's always like, I love little cliched sayings because there's so much truth underneath them. But just the way that we talk about our monogamous relationship is like, this other person, without them, I'm almost nothing, and or I'm not complete, I'm not whole. But I think that needs to be reframed if we're going to go and dive deep into monogamous and monogamous relationships, and dive deep into that sacred union style of relating.
Yeah, I love that. So there's something that I heard recently, I think from David Data, and I can't quote him directly, but I guess the overall message was about sacred union being a tool or a vessel to continue to open to love, to continue opening our hearts and to continue diving into ourselves and opening up to love. And that's not just with this other person, that's in life and in all of our relationships and who we are in the world. And so this relationship, instead of it being a mere existence with each other, we sleep next to each other, we get the alarm goes off at 8, we go to work, and then we come home and like we might go to dinner or whatever. Instead of existing, your relationship is a vessel. It's a container. It's a safe container that you make together so that you can continue to drop in, go deep, explore, discover, and sometimes be deeply triggered, my gosh, and continue to open. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think within every, I guess we're talking about monogamous relationships. So within every monogamous relationship, there's 3 relationships, right? There's a relationship that you have with yourself. There's a relationship that your partner has with themselves. And then there's your relationship as a container, which you both are contained in. And if you're not doing the work for yourself, and you're not going through your own processes and figuring out what's going on for you, and your partner's not doing the same thing, then that container, that third relationship, which is actually the two of you coming together, is not going to thrive. It's not going to prosper because you're not doing the work yourself. So I definitely think that we need to start framing this conversation around relationship being a container or being this entity that we both need to work towards by doing the work ourselves. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, awesome. So, I've got a few questions. I think the first one I wanted to touch on. Oh, I've got one word here, and that is freedom.
Amazing.
I'm just going to say freedom, and I'm going to let you run wild with it because there's a lot that we can talk about. But take
Sure.
it away, Cam.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind when you say the word freedom is like something that's talked about a lot in the like Tantra community, the tantric relating kind of circles. This is the idea that like the masculine or the masculine energy, I suppose, strives or looks for or wants, desires freedom the most, right? That's what the kind of quote unquote masculine is looking for. And, again, I'm sure your listeners are aware, but whether you're in a female or a male body, you still have a masculine pole, a masculine energy. And so this idea of the masculine seeking freedom in the confines of a relationship and in a really unhealthy way, which I see a lot with the young couples that I work with specifically, is that masculine pole looks for freedom in like shirking commitment. So like the commitment is opposite of freedom to this kind of unhealthy mindset of the kind of masculine energy. So instead of diving deep into a relationship, regardless of what that relationship looks like, freedom looks like, for the person who's unconscious or unaware of it or expressing it unhealthily looks like finding another partner. It looks like that freedom to be sexually provocative and sexually open, I suppose. Maybe that's not the right language, but it looks like jumping on Tinder and swiping right and trying to find that next person to express your freedom with. When really there's actually a lot of freedom in committing deeply to another person. Again, we're talking about monogamous relationships, but this is applicable to all relationships. The idea of fully being seen and being witnessed and being able to express your innermost desires and urges and not being judged for it, but being accepted and being held and being also challenged is, there's a lot of freedom actually in a committed relationship. There's a lot of freedom in being able to surrender into that and being seen for who you really are and opening up and being your true self. Jim Morrison used to say that our greatest fear is the freedom to be ourselves. And this is so true. And with regards to a relationship, there's a lot of fear there of rejection. A lot of people don't like to admit it, but they feel like there might be some rejection from their partner, regardless of how long they've been together. So they hold on to things and they don't, there's no freedom there to be themselves and to express themselves truly and authentically and honestly. And so this is like the reframe that we need to, I think that needs to happen with regards to, I said masculine a few times, but typically what this looks like in a heterosexual relationship is the man in that relationship cheating, right? So I don't want to generalize or stereotype, but very, very often this is the case. And the man cheats because he feels stifled by commitment, right? And there's this age-old kind of story that men don't want to commit, right? That men don't want to be settled down. And kind of this plays out, culturally and societally through the narratives that we have. But it looks like, men seeking their freedom through an affair because that makes them feel free. They have the freedom to be sexually available to other people, right? It looks like availability rather than diving deep into the freedom to express authentically with a partner. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I start hearing people talk about freedom in a relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder what the stats are, because I also had that written down here in my notes about, that stereotype of men being the cheaters and so on. But I wonder how that's changed recently because, women, as women step more into their own masculine energy and so on, whether that's healthy or unhealthy, whatever, it's, you hear it more and more of the women with wandering eyes and this kind of like predator energy that is now becoming accepted and everything. So yeah, it'd just be interesting to know where that's at now. But gosh, anyway, it's quite irrelevant. I agree. It's freedom is a big one. And so I have to say, like, I've never felt more free than within a partnership. And it's because I feel like I'm free to make mistakes and I'm free to dive or to sort of like have that torch shine the light on, I guess, some of the things that I hold so deep in the dark, like some of my like deepest secrets that I still don't even want to look at myself. My partner somehow manages to very gently shine a torch on those things, and that's when we're talking about that kind of individual work within the relationship, right? It's like, oh, okay, this is something that is coming up for me, and you're helping me see that, and now within the container that we've created together, because it's a safe space, I'm able to work through it.
Yeah, 100%.
So how else? It's like, okay, so say we've got some listeners on here and they're like, okay, cool, I want to do this. I'm going to do this like conscious monogamy thing. Like, what are some actual tools that we can use in terms of, mindset or even like pragmatic tools to help keep our relationship thriving?
Yeah, beautiful. There's a it's a really useful model that I use with a lot of clients that come and see me about this. And there's a guy called Robert Sternberg talked about the triangular model of love. And so within a relationship, there's these three elements that we need to balance, that we need to navigate and try and incorporate into our loving relationship. And that is intimacy, passion, and commitment. And so what happens then if we only focus on two and we leave out one? For example, we have commitment and we have that's overemphasized as commitment, and maybe some intimacy as well, but there's no passion. Then typically we think of maybe an older couple that doesn't have any passion or lust or desire, but they're holding hands and they're being your typical kind of Instagram photo of a old cute couple, right? Then there's this idea of okay, well, what does like intimacy and passion look like with no commitment? And this can be like typified by like a summer fling, right? You've just gone on holiday overseas and just this whirlwind kind of really sexually charged relationship with someone overseas, and then at the end of summer you fly back home and you never see that person again. So if we're going to cultivate this loving long-term relationship, we need to start having a conversation with regards to what all those three things look like. So this is a good talking point. Again, we touched on communication, but this is a good way of like framing a conversation with your partner. It's like, okay, well, what do we think of intimacy? What does intimacy mean for you? What does intimacy mean for me? And then where do we come together, and how can we cultivate intimacy in our relationship? And then have the same conversation around passion. What does passion look like for you? What does passion look like for me? And this is where we have conversations around, I guess, like a lot of things that pop up in the work that I do is like differing, like libidos and sexual desires and sexual urges, and sex drives. So that's a conversation to have within the framework of passion and what that looks like. And then the last conversation, or the other conversation to have, is around commitment. What does commitment look like for you? And this is like setting up your boundaries and being able to define what your relationship looks like. And yeah, so it's really important to, I guess, use that framework to have a bunch of different conversations. It doesn't have to be done all at once, but it's definitely a launch pad into some important and some serious conversations to have with your partner.
And it's so important to get aligned on those things, hey, because that's when it comes down to core values. Yes, definitely.
And it also allows, like, it gives you a framework to express as well. And so many people, I guess, I see a small percentage of that people, but they say, oh, I never knew that this is what you were thinking, or I never knew that this is what you defined as commitment, or this is what you defined as passion. And it's like, if you don't have that conversation, if you don't tell your partner, you just assume, and there's just a lot of assumptions made in relationships. I find, like, you're not a mind reader, your partner's not a mind reader. Like, there's no way for that person to know what it is that you expect from them if you're not having that conversation. So we just, so often I fall into this as well in my relationship, of just expecting my partner to know what to do without actually asking them or telling them or expressing in any way. And then when they don't do that, which obviously they're not going to do because they're not a mind reader, I build resentment, right? I feel like they failed me somehow, or I feel like they've not lived up to my expectations, even though I never told them what those expectations were in the first place. And I find this happening a lot in all types of relationships, specifically monogamous relationships, because there's that breakdown of conversation, of communication, and just expectation and assumption placed upon partners.
Yeah, so true. Like, relationships are sort of constant work, although I don't want to use the word work because that feels a bit not fun and playful. Feels like work. It's really rewarding and fulfilling when you are both taking the time constantly to, give back to that container that you're creating and maintaining it, And I think like complacency, especially in long-term relationships, is so easy to fall into. And just, like starting to get a little bit slack with, I guess, date nights, or like setting aside that time to have those, connection points and develop your intimacy even further. Because really, as individuals, we're constantly changing and we're constantly evolving. And if we're not constantly relearning and like re-getting to know each other and fall in love with each other again and again and again, then we lose touch and we just kind of fall into that existence pattern. So it just takes awareness and work to actually put the time aside to keep doing those check-ins, keep playing those games with each other, and keep stoking the embers of this container so that it can flourish and burn, right?
I 100% agree with you. Like, I know we don't like to use the word work, but it almost is quite apt, because we have this Hollywood romantic, idealized notion of what a relationship is, and if we watch movies, it's like, as soon as the person falls in love and gets in a relationship, everything's fine, everything works out, and they live happily ever after. Right? This is a fairy tale scenario that's kind of been played out and perpetuated by our media, and obviously real life is not like that. Maybe it is for some and for a percentage, but for the vast majority of people, this is not what happens in a relationship. There's no quote unquote happily ever after. It's a constant stoking of the embers. It's a constant navigation of maybe compromise and inconsistencies, but just kind of working through it and figuring out what that relationship looks like over a long period of time. And it's, when we go into a relationship expecting that other person to just fulfill us and to complete us and for them to be the solution to our happily ever after, like when we deconstruct that a bit, it's pretty unfair to place that upon another person, right? It's pretty unfair for them, or for you to expect them to be this person who makes who solves all your problems, right, and makes your life meaningful again. So this is like another big thing that we try and work through as well, is like of not living your life for that other person. So like your partner shouldn't be the meaning of your life. You have to develop that purpose. You have to develop that meaning for yourself, so that then you come from a place of fullness, a place of wholeness, and choose to enter into that relationship with your partner and continue to choose that every day. And so something that my fiance and I work on in our relationship, but also something that I talk to other people about, is coming to the realization that your partner is just a person, right? And they have all the faults that other people have. They have all the limitations that just regular people have. And so for you to expect them to be your lover, your friend, your therapist, your business partner, whoever, your support network, is really, you would never put that burden onto another person. So to put it onto your partner then is pretty unfair. For your partner to do the same thing is pretty unfair for both you and for them and for the relationship. So something to start exploring is like, okay, where do I, what am I not getting from my partner that I might need to seek elsewhere? And so something that, like I can't be a girlfriend to my fiance, right? I can't sit down and have a chat super, bubbly and emotionally and stuff. And that's not my role, right? That's not who I am, to my partner. So there's scope there, there's room there for her to seek that, because it's what she desires, what she wants, what she needs from female friends. Just as she can't be a male friend to me, and we don't just sit down and have a beer and just talk shit. So there's scope for me and room for me to to find that somewhere else. And then we expand on that, and it's like, okay, well, are there certain things in terms of feminine energy that I'm not getting from my partner? Do I spend a bit of time hanging out in doing maybe a dance class or something like that, where I'm connecting to my femininity with regards to other people that are around me and just kind of being in a feminine space, and then we just kind of keep expanding that. And this obviously lends itself to, okay, am I not getting something sexually from my partner? And then that opens it up to, okay, alternative styles of relating as well. So, but I think this is within the confines of a monogamous relationship is like something to start just kind of being aware of. And a lot of people are afraid of that, I feel, because it's then like, oh my God, it's admitting, right? It's acknowledging that your partner isn't your sole source of meaning and purpose, and they don't fulfill every aspect of your life, which is for a lot of people a scary thing to admit, and a scary thing to acknowledge for themselves as well, is that I'm not my partner's one and only. I'm not my partner's I can't fulfill everything that they want. So it kind of works both ways.
Why is it so hard? Because it can feel sad in a way to admit that.
Yeah, I think there's a like a deep insecurity that we have that most people have about like abandonment maybe, or anxiety around not being able to pleasure or fulfill someone. There's a lot of ego involved in that as well. So it's a tough nut to crack, and there's probably a lot of things that go into it. But I think it's important to start having those conversations and start, and then maybe oh my God, you find out there were some things that your partner can actually fulfill for you and can actually offer to you that you maybe weren't getting from them, but you just never had that conversation. So again, it's about, just expanding on it and starting to notice it and become aware of it, I think.
Because that attachment to relationship from a place of like anxiety and fear of losing them is a bit of that sort of codependency piece, is it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just having all of these little revelations in my brain as you're speaking. So this is really good. Yeah. What about sex and long-term relationships? I mean, it's like there's also another really strong story that, sex just dwindles in relationships, and, that's just what happens. Right. And I think one thing for me personally that I've experienced and that it really resonates with me is not listening to that story. And actually every day when I look at my partner, looking at him and just being like, damn, like you're so sexy, even if I'm not, even it doesn't mean I want to have like penetrative sex, and it's okay to go through phases where we might not be as active or whatever, but to have the mindset and to continue stoking those embers of pleasure, like not only within myself, but within the relationship as well, and like just constantly be seeing the other person. If they walk past me and I get a whiff of their scent, to indulge in that pleasure of them always, and just have that awareness to keep doing it, and don't forget, and don't take it for granted, and don't get complacent, because that's what we love. That was what we were like completely fired up about when, in the beginning. And so there's no reason why that has to fade. We just need to be aware and continue to acknowledge it and love it. So did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that's a really lovely way of looking at it. And I think that's really important as well, as like just coming back to your partner and coming back to that, that arousal and that pleasure that your partner can bring you. There's a lot of, there's a lot of statistics and research out there that suggests that, in a strong, healthy relationship, just in general, kind of outside of the bedroom, sex doesn't play a huge role. If everything else outside of the bedroom is going really well, if we're working on that intimacy and that commitment and other types of passion, then the sex life can maybe not play such a big role. But when outside of the bedroom, when the intimacy isn't there, if the commitment's not really there and there's some issues kind of going on outside of the bedroom, then sex plays a disproportionately larger role in the kind of the breakdown of that relationship. So I think it's like in a healthy relationship, sex plays a 40% role. In an unhealthy relationship, sex plays a 70% role. So
fascinating.
So if you're if things are going on outside of the bedroom and inside the bedroom, it's going to be, sex is disproportionately more important. So so when we start looking at like how to stoke those embers of pleasure and passion for one another, we're going to start, something that's I work through a lot with couples is their different levels of sexual desire, right? And sexual sex drive, I suppose. And so like on a scale of 1 to 10, ask yourself, honestly, what's my libido? What's my sex drive? And yours might be a 6 or a 7 or whatever it is. And then ask yourself, okay, what do I think my partner's is? And then you might think your partner's is you might think you're pretty evenly matched and they're a 6 or a 7 as well. But then go and ask your partner and then see what they say about themselves and see what they think yours is before you start sharing with one another. And if there's a bit of a mismatch there, then it starts to elucidate some of that, what might be an issue. It's like, oh, okay, I thought my partner was a 6 or a 7. They actually feel like they're a 3 or a 4. It's like, oh, okay, it's probably one of the reasons why maybe I'm not feeling super sexually fulfilled by my partner at the moment. So then that opens up a conversation of like, okay, well, what can we do to bridge that gap a little bit? It's like, well, there's a lot of story around sex only being penetrative, right? I think we spoke about this last time, but it's like, okay, well, sex and sexuality and sexual expression can come from a whole bunch of different things. It can come from maybe a sensual massage. It can come from, some just affectionate touching, or it can come from just some deep kissing, or it can come from a whole bunch of other ways. So it's like, okay, what can we now incorporate into our quote unquote sex life that makes me with the 6 or a 7 sex drive or libido feel like that's being fulfilled, but it isn't pushing the partner with a lower 3 or a 4 to go into a sexual situation that they feel uncomfortable with because they're not ready for it, or they're not feeling super sexual in terms of penetrative sex. So there's like this, again, another communication, another conversation to be had around what can we do to bridge this gap between our sexual desires and sexual urges. And then once we start doing this, it opens up conversations around fantasies and other urges and other desires, and again, having the freedom to explore those, the freedom to express those, free of judgment, free of restriction, free of almost free of complaint as well, because the safe container of that relationship has been built, the safe space has been kind of opened up and allowed you to have that conversation, to express. So sex is definitely this almost like monolithic thing that we kind of place up on this, like, oh God, we're going to lose it if we get into a long-term relationship, and we're never going to have sex with anyone else again, and sex is going to be boring, and we kind of project all of these fears onto this onto sex essentially, and then it's like, okay, none of these, because all this fear is up the top on this pedestal, all these conversations then get kind of pushed really down below, and it's like, oh, I can't have any of these conversations because it's just gonna reaffirm my fears of sex, and all my insecurities are gonna come out, and so it becomes this kind of never-ending cycle of like pushing it down, and never having these conversations.
Cam, my mind is blown. And I don't know what to do about it, because I'm obsessed with sex. I mean, clearly, I work in healthy sexuality, but, what you were saying before about in healthy, strong relationships, sex only kind of making up 40% importance of that. My mind was just going, oh my God, what does this mean? Because I always thought that sex that you had with your partner was almost like like a report card on how you were going in your relationship. Not to say how much, not about how much you're having, or, you know, whether you're multi-orgasmic every time you have penetrative sex with your partner. That's not what I'm saying, but the sort of connection and intimacy within the bedroom was a sort of mirror of what was happening outside of that. And so I had always placed this importance on sex and sexuality. Am I kind of getting that confused, or is that, I don't know.
No, I definitely think you're right there. And if things are going, if things are going right, and if things are strong and healthy outside of that, outside of the bedroom, outside of the sexual connection, then, then sex is going to be good, right? And sex is going to be connected. If you're framing it as this report card, and if things are going well outside, then things are going to be going well inside the bedroom as well. But if things aren't going well outside the bedroom, then nothing goes right inside the bedroom. And it's like, oh fuck, my sex life is terrible, and oh my God, now outside the bedroom it's worse as well. So it just becomes this snowball effect, I suppose, which is evidenced by this 70% kind of mark that we see in unhealthy or unstable relationships.
Oh my gosh, my mind is just exploding right now. Wow, thanks for bringing that to my attention. It's something that I'm definitely looking forward to unpacking more and more. So there's this whole thing with conscious relationships allowing us to grow and change, and not having an expectation on them being forever, and it being okay when we sort of part, and allowing the space and quote unquote freedom for us to sort of move fully and authentically within our life. And then I see, people who are in, conscious monogamous relationships still getting married and really owning that. And I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on, happily ever after, and making that lifelong commitment.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember here is, like, these people that are working towards conscious relationships, they're also quote unquote doing the work themselves, right? So all these things we spoke about with regards to putting all that pressure on another person forever and ever to fulfill every single one of your desires until death do you part, like this for a long time has just been people, for the most part, not doing the work themselves. So it's probably the reason why so many of these forever and ever relationships end up not being forever and ever. It's because people aren't necessarily conscious about doing the work themselves, and they're not having these conversations that kind of we're having today. And so, like, these stories about sex as well come into it. This one penis forever, type situation, or never having this boring sex life forever and ever, and placing all that pressure on another person. There's we got to remember that a lot of people that go into those relationships maybe aren't necessarily doing the work themselves. So these people that are working towards conscious relationships and conscious monogamy, and also choosing to get married, it's almost like a declaration of, like, okay, we're doing this, we're diving deep into this, it's official, almost, and we're going to continue doing the work. We're going to continue. I'm aware of the fact that you're just another person, and that I'm just a person, that we can't fulfill one another. So let's commit to this thing, and let's commit to the work, and commit to creating that container, creating that space. So although it maybe seems like a little bit of a contradiction, talking about this freedom and that sort of stuff, I definitely think that I think it definitely lends itself to marriage and to long-term commitments, and to these people that are doing conscious relationships. But even then, there's still this idea that maybe you have more than just, we talk about soulmates a little bit. There's this idea that you only have one soulmate. I think that's kind of perpetuated by Hollywood and romantic comedies and that sort of stuff again. But maybe there's scope to have a think about, like, do you have a different soulmate for a different time in your life? Does a relationship run its course? Does it serve its purpose? Does it serve you and your partner for a certain amount of time? And is it unrealistic then to expect it to last until, regardless of how much work you've done? The conversation then needs to be had about, where do you draw the line? How much work is too much work, or how much work is comes up to the point where, okay, it's not reconcilable. We can't bring the relationship back together. When do you decide to maybe end up breaking it off and going somewhere else? And can you do that with love and respect and with reverence? And so I think there's maybe outside the scope of this podcast and this conversation, there's a discussion to be had around like, okay, well, where do we draw the lines, and is it realistic to say that we'll be there forever and ever, or is there another person out there who might fulfill us and who we might fulfill as well, and who might serve us as a better relationship at a different point in our life, who might be a soulmate for us in 40 years time or something like that. So I think that's a really important conversation, at least to bring awareness to, for a lot of couples as well.
Yeah, and it's difficult because we never know, do we? You can't predict the future. And so it comes down to that trusting and just committing to what's present and what's here now. And yeah. Can bring up a lot of questions, hey? It's a lot of and it's so unique to every single person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like an example that, and it's a hard one to kind of think about because we are so in love with our partners. But if you're subscribing to this idea that it's forever and ever till death do us part, and you're my one soulmate, and you're the love of my life, well then, if the worst happens and your partner passes away, then have you just created this story in your head that you're not going to find love again, right? And that you're not going to find another soulmate, and that no one out there exists for you because that one person that did exist for you is now no longer there. So we have to be mindful of these stories that we create and these narratives that we kind of maybe don't think about a lot and don't consciously deconstruct and kind of analyze, and maybe how they might be limiting us and limiting our beliefs and limiting our experiences with our partner.
Yeah, I personally believe that, soulmates, or I call them soulies. Soulies are everywhere. And, I meet them so often, and I'm in a monogamous relationship, and I really love to be able to see and acknowledge these people. And I really think that love is abundant, but it's about making that conscious decision to choose that one person and create that container with them. It's not because there isn't any other love out there. There is. There always will be. I believe. This is what I believe.
Yeah.
But it's about choosing someone and then committing to that sacred vessel, because you just can't create that over and over again with Tinder delivered to the door on a nightly basis. You just don't get that depth. So it really comes down to what you want and what you value. And yeah. And then if we talked about this in our other episode as well, it's about accessing that feminine energy that you were talking about earlier, and finding other ways to feel fulfilled and nourished by these connections that we're exposed to every single day, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a betrayal on that container that you've created with somebody else, and it's actually just about learning all of that stuff and deep diving into your sexuality and understanding yourself better, and how you can be nourished outside of your relationship as well as inside of your relationship. And so, it's just a constant journey of learning and growing and exploring and understanding. And to kind of come back to that analogy of those two circles meeting together to form that infinity sign, it's loving yourself first, right? It's being able to nourish and fulfill and love yourself, and recognizing that you do have the capacity for self-love and self-fulfillment, and then coming from that place of fullness and wholeness and having this full cup, and then choosing to share that with another person, and your partner doing the same thing with you, right? Coming from a place of self-love first. I think there's a cliche saying, you can't love another person until you truly love yourself. And I think this is, really, really true in terms of that monogamous relationship, for sure. Yeah, coming from that place of fullness and abundance, not lack, and that like kind of needing to be fulfilled. Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up, but I forgot to ask you like the most important question of the entire podcast at the beginning, and that is, what color are you today and why?
Oh, what color am I today? I feel red today. I feel passionate, and I feel like my embers are being stoked.
Damn, I love that. Awesome. Good color. Okay, next question is, how do you cultivate more pleasure in your life?
How do I cultivate more pleasure? Oh, I think I said this last time I was on your podcast, but I didn't action it very well. But I cultivate more pleasure by just being and just relaxing and taking the time to nourish. I'm actually doing that now. So I don't think I was doing it last time. Maybe it wasn't super authentic of me. But it's definitely what I needed, and now I'm actually doing it. So just taking some time to self-love.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I can really like feel the spaciousness in you, and that's beautiful. And what's one thing you've learned about self-love recently?
One thing I've learned about self-love is that it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. True that. And, I did ask you this question last time, but maybe this is an opportunity for you to say another book that you didn't get to say last time. What is the most impactful book that you've ever read in your life?
Oh, wow. One of the most impactful books I've read is, you mentioned David Data. The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. That is a pretty phenomenal book, and I would highly recommend it to all people, not just men.
Yeah, I've read it about 3 times and I could just go over it again and again. It's awesome. Okay. This has been great. Thanks again, Cam. It's such a pleasure to have you and your wisdom on the show. And thanks. Always adore.
I appreciate it. Good to talk to you today as well.
Yeah, always. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share it with someone who you think could benefit from hearing it too. You can also sign up for Lalulah news and stay up to date with all the juicy content that we only share on email. And I want to take a moment to honor you for following your curiosity and prioritizing your pleasure in this way. And until next time, thank you so much for listening. And I'll be back with another episode soon.